But let's begin with that I am among those, as you mentioned, who believe that more transparency would restore trust in democracy. And my special case study, let's call it Urbanomics, it really describes that how the less and less transparency mean less and less democracy in a country which once upon a time was among the most liberal democratic countries in Europe. Actually, if you now visit the freedom.org and you look around the freedom index of Hungary and the neighboring country, you will not be surprised that Hungary is among the worst now, though once upon a time it was among the best. A new central bank as a part of the checks and balances, and we need checks and balances because of transparency, because of democracy. So as a part of checks and balances should be transparent itself to control the government, which should be transparent as well. And as far as Urbanomics is concerned, it's a missing part of this fantastic system. Their decisions can never be understood in deep. No? Because when they say something, it's not necessarily what they do. And then when they do something, it's never you can understand from what they were saying.
So we now know that laws can be designed by people, that we are not mobs, as they usually call us. Anyone outside this bureaucratic setup, in a bureaucrat's meeting, they say they're mobs. But we're not mobs, we're reasonable people. And we call ourselves civil society, we can call ourselves people's organizations, but we have minds and we have intelligence. And we have a hell of a lot of common sense. And I think what you lose when you get into the system of governance is common sense. And actually, for democracy, you need common sense. And so, since we have so much of it, I think it's one way in which we would really like to force government to disclose its information. And now, because we've got into modes. You see, we realize to the right to information, in fact, we've become civil servants, in a sense. People have become civil servants, because we now know that by just demanding a law and getting passed in Parliament, it's not the end of the matter. We have to see that it is put in place.
And that is the overall problem I think we have on the privacy front in Europe, is that we do have laws right now, but we're not enforcing them. That was also what triggered me the first time around, because when I was in California studying there, we had people from big US companies, including Facebook, saying the Europeans are kind of cute with the whole privacy and fundamental rights thing, but you can fuck the rules and nothing is going to happen. And this is a serious problem we have in Europe, because right now we're mainly pointing at the US, at the Silicon Valley, at the NSA, and say, you know, that's bad guys. However, we're not really doing anything to enforce our privacy rights. And I think that is actually where we have to look much more into our own side. However, from a legal perspective, of course, what was interesting is that we didn't just ask for damages, but we also asked for the benefits they made off of our data. And that's going to be a very interesting debate, because they're going to have to disclose how much money they made on each individual user, which I think is going to be, it's going to be a couple of cents, but it's going to be very interesting how many. And that is probably from the class action side was kind of interesting. Overall, what I think is interesting in the transparency debate, if you also kind of get that together with the privacy side of things, they oftentimes feel that this is a conflict. So a lot of people that are on the transparency side are also on the privacy side, and a lot of people feel that this doesn't meet up somehow. And I think what we see and what we try to have to generate in Europe or worldwide is what I call kind of informational redistribution. So the question is, do only the big guys get all the information and thereby the power out of the information, or are we able to redistribute and be able to say, you know, the small guys should have a certain privacy, and the companies and the international organizations as well as the states will be a little bit more transparent. And I think that's actually the overall theme in this whole transparency and privacy debate where we should get to.
This overall integration of all of the social domains under the logic of information in itself has a profound economic and political consequence. It has nothing to do with technology. Right? It's a profound transformation of our everyday life, what we worry about. And this is, to me, is something that is very hard to get at when we just pursue this activism through legal court means. And I entirely agree that this is something that we need to do under current circumstances, where alternative ways of conceptualizing how can citizens own the actual infrastructure, the actual data on which their lives are going to run, are not even raised by major political parties. Our political parties are completely missing from this debate because they have accepted that this infrastructure is to be provided by the market. So they're more than happy to have Google and Facebook come in and provide that infrastructure, because for them, that's actually what they think it's in their prerogative to do, right? And I think before we sort of completely surrender to the corporate takeover of our lives by these 2 or 3 corporations, we'd better try to figure out what are some of those alternative conceptions of how we can live together using some of that technology, but using it in a way that would not make us even more anxious than we currently are about everything we do, that would actually enable us to share and collaborate better.
What we need to do is to rethink about many things in our lives as commons, as local commons, as global commons, commons which are not to be commodified and not to be turned into monetarized entities. So this comes up with a very different way of organizing our lives, but also basically about different ways of thinking about what the options for different decisions may be, what are the risks, what are the costs, and how best we could, both through public protest and mobilization and through using courts, but also not allowing our social imagination to be constrained in ways which the corporations and the nexus between the corporations and states have tried to constrain.
So we now know that laws can be designed by people, that we are not mobs, as they usually call us. Anyone outside this bureaucratic setup, in a bureaucrat's meeting, they say they're mobs. But we're not mobs, we're reasonable people. And we call ourselves civil society, we can call ourselves people's organizations, but we have minds and we have intelligence. And we have a hell of a lot of common sense. And I think what you lose when you get into the system of governance is common sense. And actually, for democracy, you need common sense. And so, since we have so much of it, I think it's one way in which we would really like to force government to disclose its information. And now, because we've got into modes. You see, we realize to the right to information, in fact, we've become civil servants, in a sense. People have become civil servants. Because we now know that by just demanding a law and getting passed in Parliament, it's not the end of the matter. We have to see that it is put in place